Maddie Hartman stood at the bottom of the courthouse steps, one hand clutching the loose zipper of her worn winter coat, the other pressing gently against her swollen belly as a sharp cramp tightened across her side. The February wind cut straight through her clothes, slicing across her cheeks, but the cold wasn't the reason she was shaking. Not today. Up above, on those same gray marble steps, Bradford Collins stepped out of a glossy black Mercedes S-Class, adjusting the lapel of his perfectly pressed charcoal suit. His reflection flashed across the SUV's tinted windows like he owned the whole block. His tie alone probably cost more than her rent. And flanking him, like a queen beside a king, was Tessa Monroe, the girl he'd traded her in for. The baby-faced brunette in a fitted white coat and high heels, strutting as if she were the rightful Mrs. Collins. The cameras swarmed Brad like he was some celebrity attorney. "Brad, is it true your wife is unstable? Brad, is today the final hearing?" He gave a tight-lipped smile, his courtroom smile, meant to look humble but still managed to insult everyone. Maddie knew that smile too well. It was the same one he used right before tearing someone apart. She could hear her own breath. Shallow, uneven, too fast. Her phone buzzed in her pocket, a reminder from the clinic. High-risk pregnancy, avoid stress. A cruel joke because stress was all she had left. She had lost her health insurance. Her paycheck from the hospital had been frozen for administrative review. And last night, her landlord taped a notice on her door. "You have until Friday." Brad had stripped everything from her so cleanly, so quietly. She didn't even know she was falling until she hit the ground. And now he was going to take the one thing she had left, her child. Tessa's laugh echoed across the steps, bright, sharp, cutting through Maddie's chest like glass. Brad placed a hand on Tessa's back, guiding her toward the doors, and whispered something that made her giggle harder. Maddie looked away, her throat burning. She had once stood where Tessa stood. She once thought Brad's hand on her back meant protection, not possession. "Madeline?" a voice called. Lana Rusk rushed up, her curly hair half tucked into a beanie, clutching a folder stuffed with legal papers. She was only a junior legal assistant, but she was the only person who hadn't turned away from Maddie. "They're already inside. We need to go in before the judge starts." Maddie nodded, though her legs felt made of sand. People stared as she stepped through the courthouse doors, at her pale face, at her unsteady walk, at the bump beneath her coat. Whispering, judging, believing whatever Brad had fed the press. She swallowed hard. "You will not cry, not here, not in front of him." But as she entered courtroom 9B, her heart dropped straight through the floor. Because sitting in the front row, legs crossed, chin lifted, was the doctor Brad had bribed to sabotage her medical records. And next to him was an empty chair. Reserved. For a witness Maddie didn't know existed. A witness brought by Brad. A witness who could end her today. And then the courtroom doors opened again. Maddie Hartman had never imagined her life would shrink into a single hallway of a courthouse. But then again, nothing in her story had gone the way she once believed it would. She used to be the girl who stayed late at the hospital just to hold the hand of a scared patient. The girl who collected half-read paperback novels from thrift stores. The girl who saved every extra dollar for a chance to bring her parents from Michigan to New York someday, so they could see the dream she kept promising them she was building. That girl felt like a stranger now. Long before Brad Collins ever walked into her life, Maddie had grown up in a mobile home on the edge of a small Michigan town where winters were long and money was short. Her mother worked double shifts at a laundromat. Her father repaired broken furnaces for cash. They didn't have much, but what they had was honest. Maddie learned early that kindness wasn't weakness, it was survival. She carried that belief with her all the way to New York after earning a partial scholarship to study nursing. She lived on instant noodles, washed her clothes in the dorm sink when the machines ate her quarters, and worked nights at a community clinic in Queens. Still, she never complained. She was building something, a future, a life she could be proud of. Then Brad happened. He came into the clinic one night with a minor cut on his hand, bloodless, barely a scratch, yet he insisted on being seen immediately. He was dressed in a sharp suit, expensive watch glinting under the fluorescent lights, speaking with that humming confidence New York lawyers seem to be born with. "You're new," he had said, studying her name badge with an amused tilt of his head. Madeline, pretty name. She remembered blushing. She remembered feeling seen, noticed, valued. For a while, he made her feel safe in a city that often didn't let people like her breathe. He took her to dinners she couldn't afford, bought her flowers she didn't ask for, told her she was too good for night shifts. Within a year, they married. Within 2, he was earning more money than she could comprehend. And Maddie, believing him, stepped back from night shifts to part-time clerical work. That's when things changed. Brad became colder, sharper, critical of how she dressed, how she cooked, how she didn't understand the pressure he was under. He began calling her forgetful, emotional, unreasonable. Gaslighting disguised as concern, control disguised as love. When she finally became pregnant, something she had dreamt of for years, Brad's reaction was a flat, "We'll figure it out." No joy, no warmth. And slowly, methodically, he tightened his grip, separating finances, monitoring her spending, pushing her out of decisions, pushing her out of herself. Maddie learned to hide her prenatal vitamins in her coat pocket because Brad kept saying they were a waste of money. She learned to swallow her fears at night when the headaches from her high-risk pregnancy got worse. She learned the silence of being married to a man who always made her feel small. But she clung to one thing: hope. Hope that Brad was just overwhelmed. Hope that the baby might soften him. Hope that love wasn't supposed to hurt this much. She held on until the day she saw the text message pop up on his locked iPhone screen. Just one line, from Tessa. "I miss you already." That was the moment something inside her shattered. Not loudly, not dramatically, just a quiet breaking, like a thin piece of glass finally giving way after months of pressure. Now, standing in courtroom 9B, Maddie felt the weight of every sacrifice she'd made, every insult she'd swallowed, every dream she'd postponed for a man who never intended to protect her. And as she lowered herself into her seat, hand unconsciously guarding her belly, one truth finally settled in her bones. Brad wasn't just fighting for custody, he was fighting to erase her. But someone was about to stop him. New York City had a way of making people feel both infinite and invisible at the same time. For Maddie, Manhattan wasn't just a place. It was a pressure chamber she had been living in for years without realizing she was running out of air. That morning, as she walked deeper into the courthouse, the building swallowed her whole. Bright lights hummed overhead, bouncing off polished floors that smelled faintly of bleach and old paper. People in tailored suits rushed past her, clutching leather briefcases, murmuring legal terms she barely understood. It was a different world, one where power wasn't spoken, it was worn. On wrists, on shoes, on confidence. And Brad fit into that world perfectly. Courtroom 9B sat at the end of a long hallway lined with portraits of judges, stern faces frozen in time, watching like silent jurors. Lana walked ahead, flipping through the file they had scraped together. The thin folder looked embarrassingly fragile compared to the towering binders Brad's legal team carried. Inside the courtroom, everything felt colder. Dark wooden benches, a raised judge's platform, an American flag hanging still as stone. On one side sat Brad's team, 3 attorneys from a major Park Avenue firm, their Mont Blanc pens lined up neatly beside thick folders and a MacBook Pro already open to a slideshow of evidence. On the table was a bottle of imported sparkling water, untouched, placed there almost like a deliberate contrast to the disposable cup sitting in front of Maddie. Tessa sat behind Brad, crossing her legs as if posing for the cameras, her coat draped elegantly over her shoulders. A Cartier bracelet slid down her wrist when she rested her hand on Brad's arm, a gesture that made Maddie's stomach tighten. She remembered when Brad gave her a bracelet for their first anniversary. Nothing fancy, but she had cherished it. Now she wondered if he'd already been saving the expensive gifts for someone else. The judge entered and everyone rose. Maddie forced herself up, steadying her breath. Her belly tightened again. Another contraction? No, just stress. She prayed it was just stress. The city outside felt distant, as if sealed away behind thick courthouse walls. But Maddie knew exactly what waited beyond them. The sharp skyline of the financial district piercing the sky, the cold February sun reflecting off steel towers, the Hudson River glimmering like a sheet of broken glass. That skyline had been the backdrop of her life with Brad. The rooftop dinners he took her to early on, the late nights he worked in his Park Avenue office, the way he'd gesture toward the city and say, "One day, all of this will be ours." But ours had quickly become his. Even their apartment, once full of warm lights, shared meals, soft laughter, had transformed into a place of whispered accusations and stiff silences. Brad had slowly drained the warmth out of their home the way Manhattan winter drained color from the sky. Now, with her job at the Queen's Hospital on hold and her bank account frozen, she was fighting on the only battlefield Brad wasn't sure he could fully control. A courtroom that required truth, not charm. The judge cleared his throat. "We are here today to address custody, financial support, and allegations regarding mental and emotional stability." Maddie's pulse hammered. Stability. The very word Brad had twisted into a weapon. Brad's lead attorney rose. Smooth. Confident. "Your Honor, we will present testimony and documentation that Mrs. Collins, Miss Hartman, is currently unfit to provide a safe environment for the child." Tessa smirked. Brad folded his hands neatly. The bribed doctor sat 2 rows back, staring at Maddie with expressionless eyes. Lana leaned close and whispered, "Stay with me. Don't panic." But panic was already crawling up Maddie's spine. Because in this courtroom, this cold, echoing place where power decided fate, she felt like nothing more than a woman trying to hold her world together with trembling hands. And Brad had come prepared to crush her completely. Until the doors at the back creaked open. Again. Bradford Collins didn't need an introduction in courtroom 9B. His presence filled the space long before he opened his mouth. Everything about him screamed control. His posture, his crisp suit, the precise way he aligned his documents as if even the papers feared being out of place. He rose slowly, deliberately, smoothing his tie with the same careful elegance he once used to smooth Maddie's hair. But today, his hands belonged to a different man. Colder, sharper, one who looked at Maddie not as a wife, but as a threat he needed to eliminate. "Your Honor," he began, voice warm enough to melt butter, but hard enough to slice steel. "This is not a complicated case. My former wife has been struggling emotionally for months. We are deeply concerned for the safety of our unborn child." He said "our" as if he still had the right to claim anything that came from her body. Maddie tightened her grip on the edge of the table. Brad continued, pacing with calculated calm. "I have tried everything to support her through her condition, financially, emotionally, medically, but Miss Hartman refuses help. She lashes out, she accuses, she misremembers events. Hormonal instability has made her unpredictable." Every lie slid from his tongue smoothly, coated in false sincerity. The judge looked down at Maddie. "Miss Hartman, do you have counsel present?" Before Maddie could speak, Lana half stood. "We're here, Your Honor." "We're..." Brad cut her off with a polite smile that carried decades of entitlement. "With all due respect, Your Honor, her representative is a legal assistant with minimal courtroom experience. This case is too critical not to be handled properly." It was a threat disguised as concern, the courtroom murmured. Tessa leaned forward behind Brad, whispering loudly enough for Maddie to hear. "Poor thing. She looks like she's about to break down again." Maddie's face flushed hot. Not from shame, but from something newer, anger. Brad glanced back at Tessa with a look of possession, as if she were a trophy he'd placed on display. The Cartier bracelet on her wrist caught the overhead light, sparkling like a taunt. Then Brad switched gears, turning toward the judge with the perfect expression of a troubled but noble husband. "I have brought someone who can speak to her condition." He motioned toward the man in the second row, the doctor. "Dr. Silvers handled Miss Hartman's prenatal evaluations." Maddie's stomach twisted. She knew what was coming. Dr. Silvers stood, clearing his throat. "Your Honor, based on my professional evaluation, Miss Hartman exhibited signs of emotional volatility, elevated stress, and inconsistent self-reporting. In my opinion, she presents a risk if left as the primary caregiver." Gasps echoed lightly across the benches. The words hit Maddie harder than any slap. She remembered the appointment, how frightened she'd been when her blood pressure spiked, how she'd asked for help, how the doctor barely looked at her, how Brad hovered behind her chair, answering questions for her. Now she understood why. The outcome had already been arranged. Brad stepped closer to the judge, voice softening as if he were delivering a eulogy. My only intention is to ensure the safety of my child. Maddie needs support I can no longer provide. I'm not trying to punish her, but I cannot risk our baby." It was a masterful performance. Every word perfectly rehearsed, every lie dipped in honey. The judge scribbled notes with a slow nod, taking Brad's version of the story as if it were gospel truth. Lana whispered, "Stay calm, we'll challenge it, we'll expose him." But Maddie wasn't calm. She felt her heart pounding in her throat, her baby kicking as if sensing her fear. Brad noticed her trembling and allowed himself a tiny, triumphant smile, the kind he used to give during arguments when he'd worn her down enough to win. To him, this wasn't a custody hearing. It was a public execution of her dignity. And he believed, truly believed, that he had already buried her, until the back door opened once more and a pair of unfamiliar footsteps entered the courtroom. The unfamiliar footsteps echoed across the courtroom floor, but no one turned. Not yet. All eyes were fixed on Brad, his performance too polished, too convincing, too convenient. And for a brief, terrifying moment, Maddie feared that the judge had already decided her fate without hearing a single word from her. Brad closed his binder softly, letting the thud punctuate his argument. He exhaled through his nose as if the entire matter saddened him deeply. "Your Honor," he finished, "I am requesting temporary sole custody until Miss Hartman receives the medical and psychological support she desperately needs." Whispers rippled again. Temporary sole custody. It sounded harmless, but Maddie knew better. Once Brad had control, he would never let her near her own child again. The judge folded his hands, ready to move on. "Miss Hartman, do you have anything to say regarding these allegations?" Maddie opened her mouth, then closed it again. What could she say? She had no lawyer strong enough, no money for a medical expert, no witnesses willing to step forward. And worse, Brad had already stolen her medical truth and twisted it into something monstrous. Her throat tightened. Her palms grew damp. Her baby kicked hard, as if begging her not to give up. But before she could stand, Brad stepped forward again. "Your Honor," he said, "before Miss Hartman responds, I believe it's only fair the court hear testimony from someone who has personally witnessed her instability." He gestured toward the door. The courtroom turned, and Maddie's breath froze. Walking in, heels clicking, hair perfectly curled, lipstick flawless, was Sharon Burke, the head nurse from the Queen's Hospital. A woman who had once complimented Maddie's bedside manner. A woman Maddie trusted. No, she wouldn't do this. She couldn't. But Sharon clutched a folder and took a seat beside Brad's lawyers. Lana muttered, "You've got to be kidding me." Sharon cleared her throat. "Your Honor, I was Miss Hartman's supervisor. While she has always been compassionate, she has also been overwhelmed, distracted. There were several incidents where she appeared disoriented during her shifts." "That's not true," Maddie blurted out before she could stop herself. Sharon didn't even look at her. "I'm sorry, Maddie, but as healthcare workers, we have to prioritize safety." Brad nodded solemnly, as if grateful for her bravery. Sharon continued, "When she learned about her high-risk pregnancy, she broke down in the storage room. She cried for a full 20 minutes. Staff heard her saying she couldn't handle anything anymore." Maddie shook her head violently. "I was alone. I thought no one heard." Judge Rourke lifted a hand. "Miss Hartman, please let the witness finish." Brad glanced at the judge with that same humble hero expression. "This is exactly what I meant, Your Honor. Emotional volatility under stress." Sharon handed over a written statement. "The hospital placed her under review because we were concerned she might faint during patient care. We were not informed of her suspension only because of pending HR procedures." The word suspension detonated like a bomb. A spectator gasped. Tessa smirked behind her manicured nails. Sharon closed her folder looking guilty, but not guilty enough. Every lie piled onto Maddie until her knees weakened. The betrayal wasn't just strategic, it was personal. She looked at Brad, and he looked right back, eyes cold, victorious. He wanted her destroyed. Her reputation, her career, her motherhood, her name. "This proves," Brad said gently, "that Maddie needs help, and until she receives it, our child deserves stability." That was it. The blow meant to finish her. Maddie felt something inside her collapse. Not hope, because hope had already been crushed. Something deeper, quieter, her sense of worth, her belief that the world could still be fair. Lana whispered, "Don't fold, not now, not today." But how could she stand when every person she once trusted was now lining up to tear her apart? The judge inhaled slowly, preparing to issue a preliminary ruling. Then, the back door opened again, and a tall man in a navy coat stepped inside, his eyes locked directly on Maddie, as if he had come for her and no one else. The tall man who entered didn't speak, didn't approach the judge, didn't claim a seat. He simply stood at the back of the courtroom, watching Maddie with an expression she couldn't read. Concern, maybe recognition, maybe something else entirely. But the moment was too brief, too fragile for her to grasp. Judge Rourke cleared his throat, and the sound snapped her back into the brutal present. "Miss Hartman," the judge said, "this court must consider the child's best interest. As it stands, the evidence raises serious concerns. Concerns about her." Her heart thundered, drowning out every other sound. Brad's attorney leaned forward. "Your Honor, if Miss Hartman needs a moment, we understand. She has been under tremendous strain." He said it sweetly, like poison in honey. Tessa let out a sympathetic sigh, acting as though Maddie were some fragile porcelain doll on the verge of cracking. Lana whispered urgently, "We need to speak. Now. Bathroom." But Maddie couldn't move. Her legs had turned to cement. The judge continued, "Before I issue a temporary ruling, I will allow Miss Hartman a brief recess." A recess? Like this was some routine dispute? As if her entire life wasn't hanging by a thread? Suddenly, the room tilted, chairs warping, faces blurring. Maddie clutched the table, breath quickening. A wave of heat flooded her skin, followed by cold, sharp chills, her vision tunneled, shrinking to a pinpoint. She heard Lana gasp, "Maddie, hey, look at me. You're not okay." No, she wasn't, and she hated that Brad saw it. He folded his arms, expression softening just enough for the judge to notice. "This is exactly what I feared, Your Honor." Tessa touched his arm. "She's trembling." The Dr. Silvers watched like a man observing an experiment he already knew the outcome of. Maddie felt humiliation burn through her veins. She forced herself upright, but her body betrayed her. A stabbing pain shot across her abdomen, tight, deep, wrong. She tried to inhale, but her chest refused to lift. "Not now. God, please, not now." Lana grabbed her arm. "Bathroom, come on." They moved down the aisle, Maddie stumbling, each step a battle. She heard someone, maybe the judge, call for the bailiff, but the world was too loud, too bright. The bathroom door swung shut behind them, sealing away the courtroom noise. "Maddie, sit, now," Lana ordered, guiding her to the small bench near the sinks. Maddie collapsed onto it, pressing both hands to her belly. "It hurts, Lana, it really hurts." Lana knelt. "Look at me, deep breath." I can't." Maddie's voice cracked, tears spilling hot across her cheeks. "He's taking everything. I'm losing everything." "No," Lana said firmly. "This is a panic spiral. You've been under unbelievable stress, but you're not losing. You're overwhelmed. There's a difference." Maddie shook her head. "Everyone believes him. The hospital, the doctor, even Sharon." Her voice collapsed. "I thought she liked me. She's scared of Brad. A lot of people are." Lana squeezed her hand. "But you're the one carrying a life. You're the one who stayed kind. You're the one who deserves to win." Another cramp tightened. Maddie doubled over, breathing sharp and ragged. "Do I look like someone who's fit to raise a child?" she whispered, voice breaking apart like glass. Lana's eyes softened. "You look like someone who's been fighting alone for too long." Maddie leaned back against the cold tile wall, staring up at the buzzing fluorescent light. Memories flooded her. Michigan winters, late-night shifts, Brad's first smile, Brad's last insult, the ultrasound picture she kept hidden in her coat pocket. Her strength drained like water through cracked hands. "I can't beat him," she whispered. "He's too strong." Lana blinked hard. "Maddie, someone just walked into that courtroom. A man. Did you see him?" "I don't know who he is." "I do," Lana said quietly. "And if he's here, then Brad might not be as untouchable as he thinks." Maddie wiped her tears, slow and shaky. "Who is he?" Lana inhaled, a long, steady breath. "He's the reason you can't give up now." Before Maddie could ask anything else, the door creaked open, and a shadow fell across the tiles. Someone had come looking for her. The bathroom door eased open, and a man's silhouette stretched across the tiled floor. Maddie stiffened, clutching her coat around her belly as if it could shield her from whatever came next. Lana rose to her feet like a guard dog half her size, planting herself between Maddie and the doorway. But the man lifted his hands calmly. "I'm not here to cause trouble," he said. voice deep, steady. "I just need a moment to speak with her." The voice struck something inside Maddie, familiar but distant, like a melody she'd once heard on a day when her life hadn't been crashing down. He stepped into the harsh fluorescent light, and Maddie's breath caught. Nathaniel Reed, the tech billionaire she'd unknowingly saved 2 years ago, the man she thought she'd never see again, stood in front of her wearing a navy coat dusted with snowflakes, dark eyes filled with a quiet urgency she didn't understand. Lana exhaled. "Thank God you're here." Maddie blinked. "Wait, you know him?" Nathaniel offered a soft nod. "She called me." Maddie's confusion deepened. "Why? Why would you?" "I'll explain," Lana said, stepping aside. "But you need to hear him first." Nathaniel approached slowly, as if afraid she might shatter. "You probably don't remember me. That night at the Queen's General ER, you sat with me until I woke up. You didn't know who I was. You didn't ask for anything. You just stayed." Memories flickered. A man collapsed in the hallway, overworked, dehydrated, barely conscious, and her sitting beside him during a lull in her shift, offering water, calling him sir because she didn't know his name. He'd thanked her with trembling hands before security rushed him away. "That was you?" Maddie whispered. Nathaniel smiled faintly. "Yes, and I never forgot it." "But why are you here? How did you even know?" "Because 2 weeks ago," he said gently, "your request for legal aid passed through a nonprofit my company funds. I saw your name, and when I read what Brad was doing to you, when I saw the lies, the falsified medical records, the manipulation, I couldn't stay out of it." Maddie's eyes widened. "You know about the medical records?" "I know everything Brad is hiding." Nathaniel's jaw tightened. "And I'm here to make sure he doesn't get away with it." The bathroom seemed to shrink around her. Her pulse thundered in her ears. Lena chimed in. "Nathaniel has access to things we don't. He pulled the original digital timestamps on your hospital records. They don't match the versions Brad submitted." Maddie stared at Nathaniel in disbelief. "You hacked my medical files." He winced. "I prefer the term investigated inconsistencies. Legally." A shaky laugh escaped her, half disbelieving, half terrified. "Why would a billionaire care about someone like me?" Nathaniel's expression softened. "Because someone like you saved my life when no one else bothered. And because you're being crushed by a man who thinks power gives him the right to rewrite reality." He crouched to meet her eyes. A billionaire kneeling before a broken woman in a courthouse bathroom. "I'm here," he said softly, "because you deserve to be heard, Maddie, and because Brad Collins chose the wrong woman to destroy." Maddie's throat tightened. Tears blurred her vision, not of fear this time, but something warm, painful, overwhelming. Lana added, "There's more. I found out something yesterday and I couldn't tell you until I was sure." Nathaniel looked at her and nodded for her to continue. "Maddie?" Lana's voice trembled. "The doctor Brad used? Dr. Silvers? He was paid. There are transactions, real ones. Nathaniel's team traced them." Maddie covered her mouth. "Paid." Her nightmares were real. "And one more thing," Lana said. "Nathaniel isn't just here to testify. He's willing to be your protector under the court's emergency witness program. They can't silence you anymore." Maddie's heart pounded so hard it hurt. The world refused to make sense. Nathaniel stood and extended his hand. "Come back into that courtroom with me. You're not alone this time." She hesitated, trembled, then placed her hand in his. His grip was warm, solid, unshakable. And for the first time in months, she felt like she might survive this. Because Brad had no idea the man walking back into the courtroom with her was the one person he could never intimidate. The walk back toward courtroom 9B felt entirely different from the one that had brought Maddie to the bathroom minutes earlier. Her steps were still unsteady, but something in the air had changed. Subtle, electric, like the first warm breeze before a storm finally breaks. Nathaniel walked beside her, calm and steady, a presence so grounding she felt her heartbeat begin to sink to his quiet confidence. Lana walked slightly ahead, shoulders squared, clutching the new evidence like it was a shield. And maybe it was. When they reached the courtroom doors, Maddie paused. She caught her reflection in the narrow glass panel, eyes swollen, hair messy, coat wrinkled. She looked like a woman who had been dragged through fire. A woman stripped of her dignity. A woman one breath away from collapsing. But inside her, behind the exhaustion, was a spark. Faint but alive. Nathaniel noticed her hesitation. You don't have to look perfect to win, he murmured. You just have to speak the truth, and the truth is on your side now. She swallowed hard. Brad will twist everything I say. Let him try, Nathaniel replied. He doesn't know what we have. Lana turned. Maddie, I know you don't feel strong right now, but the judge is about to see the real you, not Brad's version, not the broken version he wants to paint. You. Maddie inhaled, slow and shaky. She imagined herself putting her pain into a jar, tightening the lid and setting it aside just long enough to stand tall again. Okay, she whispered, let's go. The moment they stepped into the courtroom, heads turned. Brad's eyebrows shot upward, displeasure flashing across his face like a crack in porcelain. Tessa stiffened, shifting uncomfortably. Dr. Silvers went pale. Judge Rourke raised a questioning brow. Miss Hartman, are you well enough to continue? Maddie stood straighter than she had all morning. Yes, Your Honor. Brad rose immediately. Your Honor, may I speak? I'm concerned she's being... Sit down, Mr. Collins, the judge snapped. Miss Hartman is addressing the court. Brad sat, jaw tight. Maddie approached the witness stand, hands trembling only slightly. She didn't have makeup or perfect hair or a legal army. But she had something new. Something Brad had worked years to crush, her voice. Your Honor, she began, a lot has been said about my mental state, about my pregnancy, about who I am, but none of it came from people who stood beside me in my hardest moments. They came from people who stood behind Brad Collins. A ripple spread across the courtroom. She continued, I'm not unstable. I'm overwhelmed because my husband cut off my income, froze our bank accounts, canceled my insurance, and used my medical records without consent. Brad's attorney jumped up. Objection. Unsupported. Nathaniel rose. Your Honor, I have documentation supporting Miss Hartman's statement. Everyone turned. The billionaire stepped forward, placing a folder on the judge's bench like it weighed nothing, though it carried enough truth to bury Brad alive. Brad's face drained of color. What is the meaning of this? But Nathaniel ignored him. Inside this folder, he told the judge, is a digital audit tracing unauthorized access to Ms. Hartman's medical file, along with proof of manipulated timestamps and financial payments made to Dr. Silvers. Gasps erupted. The judge flipped through the pages, his expression darkening with every line. Nathaniel wasn't finished. There is also a recording, he added, of an exchange between Mr. Bisu Collins and Dr. Silvers, provided by a member of Mr. Collins's household staff. Brad turned to Tessa, panic flooding his jawline. Tessa lifted her chin, eyes glistening. She wasn't smiling, not anymore. Maddie felt her breath steady. For the first time since the nightmare began, power, real power, shifted toward her. Judge Rourke exhaled slowly. Miss Hartman, you may continue. She nodded. Your Honor, I'm not asking for pity. I'm asking for fairness. I'm asking to protect my child from a man who has shown he will lie, manipulate, and bribe anyone to get his way. Brad slammed his palm onto the table. This is madness. The judge glared. Mr. Collins, if you speak out of turn again, I will hold you in contempt. Silence erupted like a slap. Maddie looked at Brad, really looked at him, and realized something stunning. He was terrified. And for the first time in years, she didn't feel small. Because Brad finally understood the truth. The woman he tried to break was no longer fighting alone. The tension inside courtroom 9B thickened until it felt almost solid, as if every breath, every heartbeat, every whispered reaction was suspended in the air. What had started as a staged humiliation, Brad's final triumphant blow, was now unraveling faster than anyone could process. Judge Rourke held the audit documents like they might combust in his hands. His gaze shifted from the papers, to Dr. Silvers, to Brad, and finally to Maddie. Miss Hartman, he said carefully, these are serious allegations. They're not allegations, Nathaniel replied before Maddie could speak. They're facts. The judge didn't reprimand him. That alone said everything. Brad shot up from his chair. Your Honor, this man has no standing in this case. He's not a relative, not legal counsel, not... He is a verified contributor to the legal aid nonprofit assisting Miss Hartman, the judge cut in sharply. He has every right to submit evidence relevant to the integrity of this hearing. Brad froze. Just for a second. But in that single second, Maddie saw something she had never seen on his face. Fear. Real, unfiltered fear. She inhaled, strength blooming like a bruise shifting into a scar. Your Honor, she said softly, I didn't think I had anyone left. My husband made sure of that. But the truth has a way of surviving even when you bury it under lies. The entire courtroom leaned in. Maddie continued. For months, Brad told me I was confused, emotional, unstable. He told everyone, my coworkers, my doctors, even my friends, that I was losing control. But what I didn't realize was that he was building a case against me while pretending to care about me. Brad slammed his fist onto the table. This is character assassination, the judge glared. Mr. Collins, sit down, now. He sat, nostrils flaring. Maddie's voice steadied. He didn't stop there. When my pregnancy became high risk, he saw an opportunity. He began manipulating my medical records by working with people who were supposed to protect my health. People I trusted. All eyes turned to Dr. Silvers. The doctor wiped sweat from his brow. Your Honor, Save it, the judge barked. You will speak when spoken to. Nathaniel stepped forward again, placing a flash drive onto the judge's bench. This contains the original recording, timestamps included. Brad pointed at Nathaniel, fury erupting. You don't know who you're dealing with. You think you can just walk in here and… Yes, Nathaniel interrupted calmly. I do. A ripple moved through the courtroom. A billionaire facing off with a lawyer who thought he was untouchable. Nathaniel turned toward Brad fully, hands in his pockets. You've spent years stepping on people who couldn't fight back. People who didn't have power. But now, you're standing in front of someone who's not afraid of you. His tone sharpened. And that scares you more than the truth coming out. Brad's jaw clenched so hard the muscle near his temple twitched. Tessa shifted uncomfortably behind him. Lana shot Maddie a quiet, proud smile. Judge Rourke addressed the room. Given these revelations, this court cannot proceed under the assumption that previously submitted medical documentation is valid. We will halt all reliance on Dr. Silver's testimony pending a full investigation. A gasp filled the space. Then, furthermore, the judge added, I am ordering an immediate suspension of all custody motions until this matter is clarified. Brad's face crumpled. Your Honor, you can't? I can. And I will. It felt like the entire courtroom exhaled for Maddie. Her knees nearly buckled, not in weakness, but in relief. The judge then turned directly to her. Miss Hartman, you may speak freely. The court is listening. It was the first time in months, years maybe, that an authority figure addressed her with dignity instead of pity or suspicion. She lifted her chin. Your Honor, I want what every mother wants. Safety, stability, a life where my child isn't used as a pawn by a man who sees parenthood as ownership. I'm not perfect, I'm tired, I'm scared, but I'm still here. A hush fell over the room. She continued, and I'm done letting Brad rewrite who I am. Brad stood abruptly, chair screeching. This is absurd. She's manipulating you. She's… Mr. Collins, the judge thundered, slamming his gavel. One more interruption, and you will be removed from this courtroom. Brad sat down slowly, his face blazing red, his chest rising and falling with barely contained rage. Nathaniel placed a comforting hand at the small of Maddie's back. Not possessive, not bold, just steady. She didn't flinch, because for the first time, Brad wasn't the one she feared. Brad wasn't the one in control. Brad wasn't the one the courtroom believed. The tide had turned, and Brad Collins was beginning to understand. This was only the beginning of his downfall. The courtroom, once Brad's carefully curated stage, had turned on him. Not violently, not loudly, but quietly, fatally, like a tide shifting direction beneath a boat that didn't yet realize it was sinking. Judge Rourke rubbed the bridge of his nose, visibly exhausted by the magnitude of deceit unfurling before him. Given the evidence presented, this court will now examine Mr. Collins' conduct as a potential matter of ethical violation. Brad froze. His pupils shrank. Ethical violation. Two words that could end his entire career. His attorney whispered urgently in his ear, but Brad brushed him off, rising from his chair with reckless confidence. Your Honor, with all due respect, this entire thing is a setup. A billionaire walks in here with a personal vendetta, and suddenly I'm the villain? Nathaniel didn't even blink. You made yourself the villain when you manipulated a pregnant woman's medical records. A murmur rippled through the courtroom, this time openly hostile toward Brad. Brad jabbed a finger in Nathaniel's direction. You don't know anything about our marriage. Nathaniel's tone turned icy. I know enough. I know what you've done, and so does the court. Maddie watched Brad's composure unravel. The same man who had once held absolute control over her emotions, her finances, her safety, was now unraveling like cheap thread in front of everyone. Judge Rourke banged his gavel. Mr. Collins, your conduct is bordering on contempt. Brad's attorney tugged desperately at his sleeve. Brad, sit down. But Brad couldn't. His ego didn't know how to retreat. This is insane, he shouted. She's unstable. She's emotional. She's pregnant, the judge corrected sharply, and under immense duress because of your actions. Silence. A dead, heavy silence. Tessa flinched visibly, crossing her arms as if trying to disappear. The courtroom's eyes shifted toward her, judgmental, accusatory. She bit her lip, no longer the smug accessory on Brad's arm. Now she looked cornered, exposed. Maddie didn't enjoy seeing her crumble, but she couldn't deny the justice in it. Brad swallowed hard. Your Honor, please. This is a misunderstanding. I didn't manipulate any records. I was misled. Nathaniel tilted his head slightly. By whom? The doctor you paid? Or the nurse who submitted fabricated reports on your behalf? Brad froze mid-sentence. The judge's gaze sharpened. Mr. Collins, are you accusing your own witnesses of falsifying documents? Brad stammered. I'm saying. You realize, the judge cut in, that if either witness contradicts your explanation, the legal responsibility falls squarely on you. Brad's face turned chalk white. Tessa whispered something urgently into his ear. He jerked away. Sharon Burke, the nurse who had betrayed Maddie, sat rigid on the bench, fear swimming in her eyes. She clutched her purse like a life raft. She knew in that moment that Brad would throw her under the bus without hesitation. Dr. Silvers, the bribed doctor, dabbed sweat from his forehead as if the room temperature had suddenly climbed 20 degrees. Judge Rourke sighed heavily, closing the folder. This hearing is no longer about custody. It's about truth. Maddie felt a tremor pass through her chest. Not fear, but release. For months she had lived inside a maze of manipulation, gaslighting, and isolation. Now the maze was burning down. The judge turned to her. Miss Hartman, would you like to provide a final statement before we recess? Her breath steadied. She rose slowly, placing a hand on her belly. Yes, Your Honor. Her voice was soft, but unshakable. She looked at the judge, then at Brad, then at everyone who had ever doubted her. I'm not the unstable one, she said. I'm the one who survived him. A woman in the gallery exhaled sharply, a sound of deep, resonant agreement. Maddie continued, all I ever wanted was a partner, a father for my child. Brad promised to protect me, but the only thing he protected was his image. He didn't break me because I'm weak. He broke me because I trusted him. And I won't apologize for that. Brad flinched as if struck. Maddie's voice softened. This child deserves love, not leverage. Truth, not fear. And I refuse to let him grow up believing control is the same as care. The courtroom was silent, breathless. Even the judge's eyes softened with something human, sympathy, perhaps even respect. Nathaniel stood quietly beside her, a silent guard. Brad stared at Maddie, eyes burning, but powerless. For the first time ever, he understood what true defeat felt like, because the woman he thought he owned now had a voice stronger than all of his lies. The judge's gavel echoed like thunder, rolling through courtroom 9B with a force that made even seasoned attorneys straighten in their seats. We will take a 15-minute recess, Judge Rourke announced. When we return, this court will address potential misconduct and determine next steps. Potential misconduct. Everyone knew what that meant. Brad wasn't just losing control, he was losing his career. As the judge exited, the room broke into a storm of whispers. Reporters scribbled frantically, thumbs tapping across phones. Tessa shrank into her seat, trying to avoid the camera lenses now pointed at her. Dr. Silvers seemed to be melting, his collar damp with sweat. But Brad was a different sight entirely. He stood frozen, hands gripping the edge of his table, knuckles white, as if holding on to the last shard of a life he built on intimidation and charm. Maddie watched him, not with fear, not with bitterness, but with clarity. Brad sensed her gaze and snapped his eyes toward hers. They weren't angry anymore. They were panicked, truly panicked. The way a man looks when he suddenly realizes the story he spent years crafting is collapsing, page by page, right in front of him. You think this is over? He hissed quietly across the aisle when the bailiff stepped away. You think you've won because some rich stranger walked in? Nathaniel didn't turn, but Lana did, like a wolf catching the scent of danger. Maddie exhaled, slow and steady. No, Brad, I think it's over because you finally got caught. His composure cracked. You're destroying my reputation. You destroyed your own. she replied softly. For the first time, Brad broke eye contact. Nathaniel stepped forward between them, voice even. Mr. Collins, I'd advise you to take a seat and prepare a statement that doesn't incriminate you further. Brad scoffed. You think you're a hero? You think she's, what, worth saving? Nathaniel's jaw tightened. I don't need you to see her worth. She already has it. Brad swallowed hard, a visible panic, a flicker of dread. Before he could retort, the courtroom doors swung open again. Two figures entered, stern, professional, badges gleaming under the lights. Internal Affairs, from the New York State Bar Association. Conversations stopped instantly. One of the investigators, an older Latina woman with sharp eyes, approached Brad's table. Mr. Collins, we received an urgent notice from the presiding judge. We need to speak with you. Privately. Brad's attorney blinked. Now? During recess? Yes, she said, immediately. Brad sputtered. This is outrageous. You can't just... But they could, and they were. The woman opened a slim black folder. We have a preliminary inquiry into possible ethical violations involving bribery, falsification of documents, and professional misconduct. Maddie's breath caught. The words felt unreal. Brad's face drained of color. I didn't. This is a misunderstanding. The judge forwarded evidence submitted today, the investigator said coolly, including financial transfers and digital logs. Please follow us. Brad turned to his attorney, pleading. Say something. His attorney, who once worshipped Brad's courtroom prowess, looked utterly defeated. Brad, there's nothing I can say until we see the files. Tessa suddenly stood. Brad, what is happening? But he ignored her, jaw clenched, as Internal Affairs escorted him toward the hallway. Nathaniel leaned toward Maddie. This won't solve everything today, but it's the beginning. Maddie nodded, overwhelmed. I never thought anyone would believe me. Lana squeezed her shoulder. They don't just believe you, Maddie. They see the truth. As Brad reached the doorway, he turned back, eyes desperate, voice low. This isn't over, Maddie. But this time, it didn't sound like a threat. It sounded like a man begging the universe not to let the consequences he earned swallow him whole. The doors shut behind him, and for the first time since the nightmare started, Maddie felt a weight lift from her chest. Not because justice was complete, but because justice had finally begun. She placed a hand gently on her belly. Baby, we're really going to be okay. Nathaniel heard her whisper and smiled softly. But before Maddie could breathe fully, the bailiff re-entered. The judge is ready to reconvene, he announced. Lana whispered, Round 2. Maddie straightened her shoulders. Because Round 2 was no longer about survival. It was about reclaiming her life. And this time she wasn't walking in alone. When courtroom 9B reconvened, the air felt different. Charged, restless, like the room itself expected something irreversible was about to occur. Without Brad present, the energy shifted dramatically. The judge returned with a stern, almost somber expression, gripping his notes as though the weight of justice had doubled in the last 15 minutes. Please be seated, Judge Rourke said. Everyone obeyed at once. Brad's attorney sat alone at his table, shoulders stiff, eyes darting toward the door, waiting for his client to reappear, but the door remained closed. No footsteps, no protest, no arrogant swagger. Brad was still in custody with Internal Affairs. The judge cleared his throat. Given the newly submitted evidence and Mr. Collins's current detainment, this hearing will continue without him until further notice. Gasps rippled across the room. Tessa covered her mouth. Sharon stared down at her shoes. Dr. Silvers visibly trembled. The judge continued, This court prioritizes the safety of the child involved. Therefore, we will now assess Miss Hartman's fitness without prejudice and without reliance on any previously tainted testimony. Maddie inhaled sharply, without prejudice. The words tasted like salvation. But the judge wasn't finished. Miss Hartman, please step forward. Her legs wobbled, but Nathaniel placed a hand at her back. Light, steady, reassuring. She walked to the center of the room. Judge Rourke folded his hands. I've reviewed your work history, your medical records, and the statements provided independently by your coworkers, those not associated with Mr. Collins. His voice softened just faintly. Miss Hartman, you have been carrying a tremendous burden alone. Maddie lowered her eyes. Yes, Your Honor. What you have endured, he continued, goes beyond marital conflict. It suggests manipulation, coercion, and sustained emotional abuse. Maddie's throat tightened. Finally, someone said it out loud. The judge turned to Lana. Miss Rusk, do you have supplemental statements? Lana stood, clutching her binder. Yes, Your Honor. 3 nurses from Queens General submitted affidavits contradicting Sharon Burke's claims. They confirm Maddie was placed under review due to procedural restructuring, not due to emotional instability. Sharon's face turned chalk white. The judge nodded. Those affidavits have been added to the record. Thank you. Nathaniel stepped forward with measured confidence. Your Honor, we also have digital evidence showing that Ms. Burke received 2 unexplained payments within the past 60 days, both originating from an account tied to Mr. Collins's firm. Sharon gasped. That's a lie. I didn't know. He said. Judge Rourke raised a brow. Miss Burke, you may stop speaking unless called upon. Sharon sank into silence, trembling. Dr. Silvers swallowed hard, shrinking in his seat. Nathaniel wasn't done. Additionally, Your Honor, he said, we have subpoena-ready documentation showing Dr. Silvers accessed Ms. Hartman's file outside authorized hours. The doctor opened his mouth, but no sound came out. The judge lifted his gavel, eyes dark. Dr. Silvers, you will remain for questioning by Internal Affairs following this session. The doctor's head dropped. Maddie felt her baby move gently beneath her hand, almost as if sensing the shift. Judge Rourke leaned forward. Miss Hartman, based on the legitimate evidence before me, it is clear you were unfairly portrayed. You have demonstrated resilience, responsibility, and remarkable composure despite significant pressure. Her breath caught. The judge continued. Effective immediately, temporary custody is granted to you. Mr. Collins is prohibited from making decisions regarding the child until this investigation is complete. A wave of emotion surged up Maddie's throat. Relief, disbelief, gratitude. She steadied herself, blinking back tears. Behind her, Lena mouthed, You did it. Nathaniel's hand rested briefly against her shoulder, warm, proud. But the judge wasn't finished. In addition, Miss Hartman, the court is granting you temporary protective oversight. Given the interference we have witnessed, Reed's involvement as a verified supporter is approved. He may act as a stabilizing resource as needed. Brad's attorney shot to his feet. Your Honor, this is unprecedented. A billionaire acting as... It is legal, the judge interrupted sharply. And by the book. Nathaniel nodded respectfully. The judge turned back to Maddie. You are no longer alone in this, Miss Hartman. This court sees you. For the first time in months, maybe years, Maddie felt her spine straighten with something she hadn't felt in a long time. Dignity. Brad had tried to break her, but instead, he strengthened the woman who would rise to destroy his lies. The moment Judge Rourke adjourned the hearing, the courtroom erupted. Not loudly, no shouting, no chaos, but with a simmering electric tension that ran through every whispered conversation and every glance exchanged across the benches. Reporters rushed into the hallways, phones already raised, voices low but urgent as they typed headlines that would detonate across Manhattan by nightfall. High-profile attorney investigated for bribery. Pregnant wife granted custody after shocking revelations. Billionaire steps into courtroom, turns case upside down. The world outside was rearranging itself, and Brad Collins no longer controlled the narrative. Maddie stood slowly, still absorbing the judge's words. Temporary custody, official recognition of abuse, oversight for her protection. She'd walked into that courtroom a woman condemned, and walked out a woman believed. Her throat tightened, not with pain this time, but with something gentler, something warm. Nathaniel watched her closely. You did incredibly well, he murmured. I didn't do anything, she whispered. You're the one who... No, he cut in gently. The truth only has power when the right person speaks it. Today, that was you. Lena joined them, practically vibrating with adrenaline. Maddie, you were amazing, strong, steady. That line about surviving him, people are going to talk about it for years. Maddie flushed. I wasn't trying to be powerful. I just didn't want to break in front of him anymore. That is power, Lana said. Before Maddie could reply, the hallway shifted. A commotion. Raised voices. Footsteps. Brad appeared, escorted by the Internal Affairs officers, his hands no longer confident, no longer steady. He looked smaller somehow, like the expensive suit on his back no longer fit the man he was pretending to be. He spotted Maddie instantly. His expression twisted, rage, fear, disbelief all tangled together. Madeline, he barked, lunging forward before an officer caught his arm. You think this changes anything? You think you've won? Nathaniel's posture turned protective in an instant, stepping slightly in front of her. "Mr. Collins," the officer warned, "you are not permitted to speak to her." Brad ignored him, eyes burning through Maddie. "You think a man like him will stay when things get hard? When you fall apart? You think he cares about you?" Maddie's breath trembled, but she didn't look away. Not this time. Nathaniel's voice cut through the air, low, even, lethal. "You should worry less about who stays with her, and more about who's leaving you," Brad snarled. "Stay out of my life." "I'm not in your life," Nathaniel said calmly. "I'm in hers, and that's where the court has placed me." The hallway went silent. Even the officers paused. Brad's face darkened, almost purple. "You can't just walk in and take everything from me." Nathaniel tilted his head slightly. "Isn't that exactly what you tried to do to her?" Brad lunged again, this time with enough force that the officers had to restrain him fully. "You're going to regret this, Madeline," he shouted. "I'll take everything. You hear me? Everything." Maddie felt a shiver run through her, but not from his words. From the realization that they didn't hold the same power anymore. She stepped forward, just one step, but enough to bring her into Brad's line of sight. "You already took everything," she said quietly. "My confidence, my job, my safety, my trust. But you forgot something." Brad froze, chest heaving. "You forgot I could rebuild," she whispered. "And you forgot I could fight back." His mouth fell open, no words, no threats, nothing left but shock. The officers began guiding him away. But before he disappeared around the corner, the older investigator said loudly, "Mr. Collins, you will surrender all professional devices and access codes. Failure to comply will result in immediate suspension." Suspension. The word hit Brad like a brick. His knees almost buckled. The officers pulled him forward. And just like that, the man who had mocked her, silenced her, erased her, was finally facing the consequences of his cruelty. Nathaniel placed a hand lightly on her back. "Are you all right?" Maddie nodded slowly. "Yes," she said, and for the first time, it was true. Because justice had begun, and Brad Collins had only just started paying his price. And fate was far from done with him. By the time Maddie stepped outside the courthouse, the sky had darkened into a steely Manhattan gray. Thick clouds rolling low over the skyline like a warning. The February air stung her cheeks, but she welcomed the cold. It grounded her. After everything inside that courtroom, the icy wind almost felt cleansing. Reporters waited at the bottom of the steps, microphones outstretched, cameras blinking like a swarm of mechanical insects, hungry for a headline. Nathaniel positioned himself slightly ahead of her, instinctively shielding her from the chaos. Lana stood on her other side, clutching Maddie's documents like a lioness guarding her cub. "Miss Hartman, is it true your husband falsified medical records? Did the billionaire's testimony swing the ruling? Are you two romantically involved?" one reporter asked boldly, aiming her mic toward Maddie and Nathaniel. Maddie froze, mortified. Nathaniel stepped forward, voice cool and firm. No comment. He guided Maddie through the crowd as security stepped in, pushing reporters back. Once they reached the sidewalk, Lana exhaled shakily. "I swear, if one of them asks you about your hormone levels, I'm grabbing a mic and swinging it." Despite everything, Maddie let out a small laugh. It felt foreign, fragile, and strangely hopeful. They began walking toward a quieter street, but as they turned the corner, a sleek black town car screeched up beside them. A man in a dark coat stepped out, tall, mid-50s, expensive haircut, expensive shoes, expensive everything. Maddie recognized him from the news. Clayton Royce, senior partner at Royce, Hawkins and Feldman, Brad's firm. Her stomach tightened. "Mr. Reed," Royce said, ignoring everyone else. A word. Nathaniel stepped between Royce and Maddie instantly. "If it concerns Maddie, it concerns me." Royce's jaw flexed. "We'd prefer to handle this privately." "You lost the right to privacy," Lana snapped, "when your firm helped Brad destroy her life." Royce shot her a condescending look before turning back to Nathaniel. "We take allegations of evidence tampering and professional misconduct very seriously." Nathaniel arched a brow. "Do you?" Royce lowered his voice. "Look, off the record, Brad Collins acted without our knowledge. Our firm does not engage in bribery. We can provide documentation showing he accessed systems using unauthorized channels." Maddie blinked. "Unauthorized? He said the firm approved." "They did not," Royce cut in. "In fact, Mr. Collins may have involved a junior employee under false pretenses." Nathaniel's eyes sharpened. Say it plainly. Royce hesitated, then exhaled sharply. He hacked into the firm's health partnership portal and used outdated credentials from a former partner. If this goes public, our reputation is at risk. We intend to cooperate with internal affairs. Maddie stared at him. So Brad acted alone? Royce's expression twitched. He acted stupidly, recklessly, and with the arrogance of a man who thought his charm could erase malpractice. Lana crossed her arms. You all knew what he was like. Don't pretend he fooled you. Royce didn't deny it. Not a word. Instead, he handed Nathaniel a sealed envelope. We are terminating Mr. Collins effective immediately. His access is revoked, his caseload reassigned. His malpractice insurance will not protect him from personal liability. Maddie's breath caught. This was more than a consequence. This was a professional death sentence. Royce turned to her for the first time. Miss Hartman, I can't undo what he did, but I can assure you, he will never again wield power under our name. He stepped back into his car and disappeared into traffic, leaving the three of them standing in stunned silence. Maddie touched her belly, emotions swirling uncontrollably. He really lost everything. Nathaniel's voice was gentle. No, Maddie. He lost everything he stole, not everything he had. Lana nodded. And honestly, it's about time. But Nathaniel wasn't finished. His eyes held something deeper, something protective, something resolute. Maddie, there's more you need to know, he said quietly. Brad's fall isn't over, not by a long shot. Her pulse quickened. What do you mean? Nathaniel glanced down the street where more reporters were gathering. Internal Affairs isn't the only one investigating him, he said softly. There's another case, one Brad kept hidden, even from you. Maddie's breath hitched. What case? Nathaniel looked directly into her eyes, the one that might finally bring him to his knees, and Maddie realized Brad's downfall had only just begun. Maddie's breath faltered, the cold February air slicing through her chest. What case? She whispered. Nathaniel exchanged a brief look with Lana, one that told Maddie this wasn't something they had planned to reveal today. But the situation had shifted too quickly, too violently. Hiding the truth now would only make it hit harder later. Nathaniel gestured toward a quieter side street away from the courthouse crowd. Let's talk over here. They walked until the noise of reporters blurred into background static. Snowflakes drifted around them like drifting flecks of ash, the sky pressing low, heavy with an impending storm. Nathaniel finally spoke. There's an ongoing federal investigation, he said quietly, into a wrongful death case with ties to Brad. Maddie blinked. Wrongful death? Lana nodded grimly. It involves a former client of Brad's, a woman whose claims he buried, literally buried, and someone finally came forward. Maddie's stomach tightened. I don't understand. What does that have to do with Brad? Nathaniel inhaled sharply, his tone steady but cold. Because the woman died after being refused a protective order Brad intentionally delayed filing. Maddie felt the world tilt. No, Brad wouldn't. But she stopped herself. She knew better now. Her name was Elise Turner, Nathaniel continued. She was trapped in an abusive marriage. She went to Brad for help because he specialized in high-conflict litigation. But Elise wasn't wealthy. She wasn't influential. She wasn't someone Brad could benefit from protecting. Nathaniel's jaw hardened. He stalled her paperwork, claimed she missed deadlines, claimed her evidence was insufficient. And when she begged for help, he told her she was overreacting and should be more understanding of her husband's pressures. Maddie covered her mouth. Every word felt like a blade, because she had lived that same dismissal. Lena's voice shook. 2 months later, her husband assaulted her. She never woke up. The case was declared a tragedy. But Elise's sister, she never gave up. She's the one who contacted the investigators, Nathaniel added. And the email trail? It's bad. Brad mocked Elise behind her back, called her dramatic, said she needed medication, not legal help. The cold hit Maddie like a slap. She remembered the exact phrases Brad had used on her. Hysterical, emotional, overreacting. How long have they been investigating? Maddie asked. Months, Nathaniel replied. Quietly, they needed more evidence before moving in, and today? His gaze darkened. Today might give them exactly what they needed. Maddie's knees weakened. Because if he manipulated my medical records, then it establishes a pattern of unethical behavior, Lana finished. A pattern of him hurting vulnerable women and using his legal knowledge to bury them. Maddie pressed a hand to her belly. her breath trembling. All this time, she thought she was the only one he tried to break. But Brad had been doing this long before her. Nathaniel stepped closer. Not invasive, just steady. "Maddie, listen to me carefully," he said. "The investigators are now looking at both cases, Elise's and yours. If they connect the dots, Brad could face more than suspension. He could lose his license permanently. He could face criminal charges." Maddie exhaled shakily, shock washing over her in cold waves. "He could go to prison." "Yes," Nathaniel said quietly. "If everything comes to light, absolutely yes." For a long moment, none of them spoke. Cars passed, snow fell, and Maddie felt something shift inside her. Not relief, not vengeance, but a deep, aching grief for the woman Elise had been. For all the women Brad had silenced, and for the woman Maddie herself used to be before Brad's cruelty reshaped her life. Lana placed a hand over Maddie's. "You're not responsible for what he did to her, but you might be the reason he finally answers for it." Maddie swallowed. "What happens now?" Nathaniel looked toward the courthouse where internal affairs was still inside. "Now," he said, "Brad's lies begin to unravel publicly, and those he hurt finally get a voice." A gust of wind rushed down the street, scattering snow across their feet. Maddie lifted her chin slowly, eyes sharper than they'd been in months. For the first time, she wasn't afraid of Brad's downfall. She was ready to watch it. By the time the three of them reached the small cafe on the corner of Center Street, Maddie felt like her legs were moving on borrowed strength. The adrenaline from the courtroom had faded, leaving behind a heavy, trembling exhaustion. Nathaniel opened the door for her, and the warm air, thick with the smell of coffee and toasted bread, wrapped around her like a blanket she didn't know she needed. "Let's sit here," Nathaniel said, guiding her to a quiet booth near the window. Maddie lowered herself slowly, one hand instinctively supporting her belly. Lana slid in across from her, already pulling a notebook from her bag, her eyes still blazing with fierce loyalty. Nathaniel ordered 3 hot teas, simple, calming, nothing fancy, then sat beside Maddie, not too close but close enough that she could feel his steady presence. For a moment none of them spoke. The silence wasn't awkward. It was relief, pure and fragile. Finally Maddie whispered, I don't know how to process any of this." Lana leaned forward. "Start with this. You're safe. Your baby is safe, and Brad's not untouchable anymore." "He never should have been untouchable," Maddie murmured. Nathaniel folded his hands on the table, his voice calm and measured. "Men like Brad build their power on fear and silence. When the silence breaks, the power goes with it." Maddie stared down at her tea, watching tiny ripples tremble across the surface. Silence. She had lived inside Brad's silence for years. Silence he used like a cage. Silence he used to make her doubt herself. But now she wasn't alone in the noise. "Nathaniel," she said softly, "why did you come? I mean, really, you didn't owe me anything." He inhaled slowly, eyes steady on hers. "You once gave me help without knowing who I was. No judgment, no agenda, just kindness." He paused. "I've spent my life surrounded by people who want something from me. Your kindness was rare." Maddie's chest tightened. She remembered that night faintly. A man collapsed in a hallway, her staying with him even when her shift had technically ended. "I didn't do anything special," she whispered. Nathaniel shook his head. "You did something human, and you did it when you had nothing to gain." He hesitated, lowering his voice. "You reminded me that the world isn't just full of people like Brad." Something warm filled Maddie's throat, almost enough to bring tears. Not the broken kind, something gentler. Lana cleared her throat. "Okay, before this becomes a Nicholas Sparks scene, we need to talk strategy." Maddie blinked, startled, then laughed softly despite everything. Lana continued, "Brad's facing investigations from multiple sides now. His firm fired him, internal affairs is tearing through his records, and if the wrongful death case ties in," she whistled, "he won't be walking out of that with a slap on the wrist." "Good," Maddie said quietly. "But where does that leave me?" Nathaniel answered immediately. "With options." "Options," he nodded. "Housing assistance through the court, continued legal support, a safe environment, and, if you're willing, employment." Maddie's eyes widened. "Employment with you?" "Yes." His tone was sincere, not patronizing. "You have experience in crisis care, organization, human services. My foundation needs people who understand what it means to help others, people who lead with empathy." But I'm a mess right now, she admitted. Nathaniel gave her a soft, understanding smile. People who've survived storms make the best guides. Lana snapped her fingers. Amen. Maddie exhaled slowly. I just don't want anyone thinking I'm using you. Nathaniel leaned closer, just an inch. Helping someone isn't the same as being used. Her heart fluttered. Unexpected, confusing, but real. A gust of wind rattled the cafe windows. Snow began to fall harder outside, coating the sidewalks in a soft white hush. Lana flipped her notebook shut. So, what's next? Maddie took a breath, steadying herself. I want to rebuild, she said. My life, my career, my strength, and I want my baby to enter a world where Brad's shadow doesn't touch us. Nathaniel nodded slowly, admiration flickering across his eyes. Then we'll build together. Maddie touched her belly gently. For the first time, it didn't feel like she was protecting her baby alone. Because she wasn't. And far from the courthouse where Brad's empire was crumbling, Maddie Hartman finally took her first step toward a life that was truly hers. Snow fell harder by the time they left the cafe, thick, heavy flakes drifting under the streetlights like shards of white glass. The city felt hushed, softer than usual, as if Manhattan itself were holding its breath alongside Maddie. Her boots sank into thin layers of slush with each careful step, but she felt strangely lighter, as though the weight she'd carried for years had finally begun to melt. Nathaniel walked beside her, silently matching her pace. Lana peeled off at the corner to grab the subway, throwing them a final thumbs up and shouting, "Text me if that rat of a man so much as breathes near you." Maddie didn't know whether to laugh or cry, so she did both, a shaky, breathy laugh that cracked into tears the moment Lana disappeared down the icy steps. Nathaniel noticed immediately. "Hey," he murmured, stepping closer but not touching her. "Talk to me." "It's just..." She wiped her face with the sleeve of her coat. "I've been holding myself together for so long, and now that things are finally shifting, I feel like I'm falling apart." "Falling apart doesn't mean failing," he said gently. "Sometimes it means healing." She swallowed hard. "I don't even remember the last time someone said something kind to me without wanting something back." Nathaniel's expression softened. "Get used to it." They walked in silence for another block. Cars hissed past on wet asphalt. Storefront lights flickered across the glassy sidewalks. The city was loud and quiet all at once. When they reached the crosswalk, Maddie felt another contraction, tight but manageable. She paused, hand pressing lightly against her stomach. Nathaniel immediately stepped in front of her. "Is it the baby?" "It's okay," she assured him. "Just stress." But inside, she wasn't so sure. He watched her for a moment longer, worry flickering across his eyes. Then he held out his arm, not grabbing her, not assuming, but offering. "Let me walk you home," he said softly. Maddie hesitated. Pride, habit, fear, she wasn't sure which one caused her pause. But today had taught her something important. Accepting help wasn't weakness, it was survival. So she looped her arm through his, and it felt safe. Her apartment building looked even sadder under the gray sky, a cracked brick facade, dim stairwell lights, mailboxes with peeling labels. Nathaniel studied it with a quiet frown. "You live here alone?" he asked. "Yes." "And Brad let this happen?" "Brad didn't let anything happen," she corrected softly. "He made it happen." Nathaniel didn't respond, but the muscle in his jaw tightened. Inside, the hallway smelled faintly of radiator heat and old carpet. Maddie unlocked her door, flicking on the light. The apartment was small and worn, but tidy. Her baby's ultrasound rested on the fridge door, curled at the edges. Nathaniel stepped inside hesitantly, like he didn't want to intrude. "Do you need anything? Food? Medicine? Someone to stay with you tonight?" Maddie shook her head. "I'm okay, really." He exhaled skeptically. "Maddie, I don't think you've been okay in a long time." His honesty caught her off guard. She looked down at her hands. "I'm learning," he nodded once. Slow, meaningful. "Good." A silence hung between them, soft, warm, not awkward. Maddie felt something gentle unfurl inside her chest. Something she hadn't felt in months. Safety, possibility, hope. Nathaniel took a step back toward the door. "If anything happens tonight, call me. I mean it, anything. I'll be here in minutes." "Thank you," she said, voice barely above a whisper. But he wasn't finished. "And Maddie?" She looked up. "You don't have to rebuild alone. Not anymore." Her throat tightened. "Why are you doing all this?" He held her gaze, something deep and unspoken flickering there. Because someone should have protected you a long time ago. Then he gently closed the door behind him, and as Maddie stood alone in her tiny apartment, holding her belly as her baby kicked softly, she whispered to the quiet room, "I think someone finally is." But outside, just beyond the hallway window, a figure stood in the snow, watching her light through the curtains. Maddie sensed it before she saw it, an unease, a shift in the air, the same instinct she'd felt during the final months with Brad, when silence carried more threat than raised voices. She moved toward the window, hand resting on her belly. Outside, snow coated the street in a soft silver haze. Streetlights glowed like blurred hell. But beneath her window, a shape stood still, unmoving, her breath caught. No, it couldn't be him. Brad was still being questioned. He wasn't allowed to leave. She leaned closer, heartbeat pounding. The figure stood tall, shoulders tight beneath a black coat. His head tilted slightly upward, toward her window, toward her light. Her pulse spiked. She stepped back instinctively, heart thundering under her ribs. A knock jolted her. Not at the door, at the window. A soft, sharp tap against the glass. She gasped, stumbling backward, gripping the edge of the counter for support. But then a voice called from the hallway, muffled, hurried, unmistakably familiar. "Maddie? Maddie, open up! It's Lana." Maddie blinked, disoriented. She hurried to the door and opened it to find Lana breathless, cheeks flushed from the cold. "Oh, thank God," Lana said, rushing inside. "I ran here. I didn't want you alone." "What's wrong?" Maddie asked, voice trembling. Lana shut the door behind her and locked it. Twice, she pressed her back against it. "Internal Affairs released Brad an hour ago." Maddie froze. "What? Why?" "Temporary release until their morning interrogation," Lana said quickly. "But he is not supposed to come near you." Maddie swallowed hard. "Lana, someone was outside my window." Lana stiffened instantly. "Tall? Black coat?" "Yes," Lana cursed under her breath. "He must have followed us from the courthouse." "Maddie, he's not thinking straight. His job is gone. His reputation is collapsing. He's cornered, and cornered men lash out." Maddie wrapped her arms around herself. "I thought he was still detained." "Temporary," Lana repeated. "But the officers warned Brad was volatile. He was shouting your name." A sharp bang sounded from the stairwell outside. Both women went rigid. Lana pulled Maddie toward the kitchen. "Call Nathaniel." Maddie fumbled for her phone. Her fingers trembled so hard she nearly dropped it. She pressed his contact. 1 ring, 2, 3. "Nathaniel?" she whispered. He answered instantly. "Maddie? What's wrong?" "Someone's outside," she breathed. "My window and the stairs. It might be Brad." Nathaniel's voice dropped into something cold, lethal, controlled. "Lock the door. Do not move. I'm 2 blocks away." A louder slam echoed through the hallway. Closer now. Maddie flinched. Lana grabbed a kitchen knife. "Stay behind me." Lana, put that down. "No, I promised I wouldn't let you face him alone again." Another slam. Footsteps. Slow, deliberate. Brad's voice echoed through the thin hallway walls. "Maddie." She froze. Her lungs forgot how to work. "Maddie, open the door." Brad crooned, voice unnatural, syrupy and cracked. "We need to talk." Lana held the knife tighter. "Don't you dare." Brad's footsteps dragged across the worn carpet outside. "You ruined my life," he rasped. "You humiliated me. You—" A heavy bang rattled the door. Maddie jumped, gasping. "Open up!" Brad shouted. "No!" Lana yelled back. "Leave before we call the police." Brad let out a humorless laugh. "The police? Half of them worked with me. They owe me favors? You think they'd believe you?" But Maddie heard it, the desperation threading through his voice. He was unraveling, losing grip. He banged again and again. Lana stood stronger. "You're done, Brad. Back away." Silence. Then, "I loved you, Madeline," Brad whispered, voice pressed right against the door. "And you threw me away for a stranger." Maddie felt tears sting her eyes. "Brad, go home, please." He slammed the door one final time, when suddenly, footsteps thundered up the hallway. A deep voice roared, "Step away from the door." Brad jerked back. Nathaniel burst into view, flanked by 2 uniformed officers. Snow clung to his hair. His jaw was carved in fury. "Don't you move," an officer commanded, weapon drawn. Brad lifted his hand slowly, shock flickering across his face. She lied. She lied about everything. Nathaniel stepped forward, standing between Brad and Maddie with fierce, controlled rage. "You ever come near her again, and you won't be dealing with internal affairs," he growled. "You'll be dealing with me." For the first time, Brad looked afraid. The officers cuffed him. reading his violations. Maddie sank against the wall, trembling, tears pouring silently. Nathaniel crossed the room in seconds, kneeling beside her. "Maddie," he whispered, taking her shaking hands, "it's over. You're safe. I'm here." Her voice broke open. "I thought he was going to." "I won't let anything happen to you," Nathaniel vowed. Outside, Brad shouted as he was dragged away into the snow. Inside, Nathaniel wrapped a protective arm around her. And for the first time in years, Maddie believed the nightmare was finally ending. The sirens faded long after the cruiser carrying Brad disappeared into the snowy night. The hallway outside Maddie's apartment, once echoing with violence and terror, was now painfully quiet. Just the faint hum of the old radiator and the soft hiss of snow against the window. Inside, Maddie sat curled on the couch, wrapped in a blanket Nathaniel had gently draped over her shoulders. Her hands still shook. The adrenaline had crashed, leaving her exhausted and hollow. But beneath it all, there was a fragile sense of safety she hadn't felt in what seemed like years. Nathaniel stood by the window, speaking with the officers in low, clipped tones. Every so often he looked back at her, checking, making sure she was still okay, still breathing, still grounded. When the officers finally left, he shut the door softly and locked it. Twice. Maddie let out a slow breath. "Is he gone?" "For tonight," Nathaniel said gently. "Tomorrow, he'll face the judge again. And now he has multiple violations stacked against him. Breaking a protection order, intimidation, attempted forced entry. Brad's in deep." Maddie nodded, though her body still trembled. "I really thought he was going to break the door." Nathaniel knelt in front of her, eyes level with hers. "I wouldn't have let him." Her throat tightened. "You got here so fast." "I ran." He hesitated, then added, "I've never been that scared in my life." The honesty in his voice made her chest ache. No one had ever rushed for her like that. She swallowed. "Nathaniel, you shouldn't have put yourself in danger." He gave a faint, almost sad smile. "You forget something, Maddie. I'm not bulletproof. I'm human, and sometimes humans run toward the people they can't stand to lose." Her breath caught. The room felt smaller suddenly, warmer. She looked down. "I don't know how to let someone help me. I don't even know how to let someone stay." "That's okay," he murmured. "You're learning." He sat beside her, close but not crowding her. The sofa dipped gently. For a long moment, they just breathed in the same quiet space. "Did the baby calm down?" he asked. "Yes," she whispered, resting a hand on her stomach. "I think he knows it's safe now." Nathaniel's gaze softened in a way Maddie had never seen before. "I'd give anything to make sure it stays that way." She exhaled shakily. "You've already done too much." "No," he said firmly. "Brad took too much. I'm giving back what he stole." Her eyes glistened. "Why does that feel harder to accept than the pain he caused?" "Because kindness requires trust," he replied. "Pain doesn't." His words sank into her like warm water easing a bruise. She looked around her small, dim apartment, the one Brad allowed her to live in because it made her dependent, quiet, isolated. For the first time, she saw it clearly. This wasn't a home. It was a cage. Nathaniel seemed to sense her thoughts. "Maddie, you can't stay here." "Not anymore." "I know," she whispered. "I can arrange an apartment through my foundation, something safe close to the hospital, with security." She shook her head weakly. "Nathaniel, hear me out," he said softly. "This isn't charity. This is protection. Until Brad's case finishes, you need stability." Her lip trembled. "And after that?" Nathaniel hesitated, then answered honestly. "After that, I hope you'll let me stay in your life, in whatever way you want." The vulnerability in his tone, a man of power speaking as if she held the answer to his future, broke something open inside her. "I don't know what I'm ready for," she whispered. "Everything still hurts." "I'm not asking for anything now," he said gently. "Just a chance, whenever you're ready." The radiator clanked softly. Snow tapped the window. The world felt suspended. Maddie looked at him, really looked, and saw a man who wasn't rescuing her for his ego. He was showing up because he cared, deeply, genuinely, dangerously. A tear slipped down her cheek. He brushed it away, not with passion, not with pressure, but with kindness so gentle she almost broke. "Rest," Nathaniel murmured. "I'll stay here tonight. I'll sleep in the chair. I won't leave until morning." "Why?" she whispered. His answer was simple and devastating. "Because no one should ever be afraid in their own home." Maddie's heart clenched. For the first time, the night did not feel like something to survive. It felt like something beginning. Morning sunlight spilled through Maddie's window like a soft apology for the terror of the night before. The snow outside glittered, untouched and peaceful. Manhattan looking, for once, like a place where new beginnings were possible. Nathaniel was still there. Not hovering, not intruding, just dozing lightly in the armchair across the room, chin tilted toward his chest, coat draped over him like a makeshift blanket. At some point during the night, he had moved closer to her, staying in sight so she wouldn't wake up afraid. For the first time in months, Maddie had slept, really slept. Her hand instinctively found her belly, the baby shifting gently beneath her palm as if reminding her they were still here, still safe. A soft knock sounded at the door. Maddie stiffened, but Nathaniel woke instantly, alert in less than a second. "It's okay." Lana's voice called. "It's just me." Nathaniel exhaled, shoulders relaxing. Maddie opened the door to find Lana holding a paper bag of breakfast sandwiches and a steaming Starbucks cup. "Well," Lana said, stepping inside, "someone had a dramatic evening." Nathaniel groaned as he stood. "That's one word for it." Maddie tried to smile, but Lana stopped in front of her, hands on her shoulders, eyes softening. "You're safe," Lana whispered, "and Brad isn't getting out again." Maddie blinked. "What do you mean?" Lana's lips tightened. "He had a hearing at 8 a.m. Judge Rourke tore into him, violating a court order, attempted forced entry. His bail was revoked." She paused for effect. "He's being held without release until trial." Maddie nearly collapsed in relief. Nathaniel steadied her instantly, hand warm at her elbow. "They also reopened Elise Turner's case," Lana continued. "2 more women came forward this morning. Brad's toast." The weight of those words settled slowly into Maddie's bones. Toast. Done. Finished. Everything he had built on manipulation, fear, charm, and cruelty, finally crumbling under the truth. Maddie wiped a tear. "What happens now?" "Now," Lana said, grinning, "you rebuild, and he pays." Later that afternoon, Maddie found herself inside a warm office with floor-to-ceiling windows overlooking the East River. Nathaniel's foundation headquarters. Clean, bright, safe. Nathaniel walked her through the space, introducing her to staff who smiled warmly, not pityingly. He showed her the department where she'd start. Simple administrative and outreach work until she was ready for more. "You don't owe me anything," Nathaniel said softly, "but you belong somewhere that values you." Maddie exhaled. "I don't know how to accept something good without flinching." "That's okay," he murmured. "Good things shouldn't demand anything from you. They should meet you gently." Her eyes grew warm. She wasn't falling for him. She was learning she was allowed to feel safe with him. 2 weeks later, the court finalized a long-term protective order. Brad's lawyer resigned. His firm released a statement condemning his actions. The Bar Association suspended his license pending criminal charges. Maddie didn't rejoice, but she breathed easier. Every night she felt the baby kick. She whispered, "We're free." But there was one more moment she wasn't expecting. A crisp March morning. Cherry blossoms beginning to bloom at the edge of Central Park. Nathaniel beside her, hands tucked in his coat pockets. He cleared his throat. "Maddie, I need to tell you something." She turned to him, heart steady. "I don't want to rush anything," he said, voice low, earnest. "You've been through more than most people endure in a lifetime, but I want to be part of your life. Not because you need protection, not because of the baby, because of you." Her breath trembled. "Nathaniel," he stepped closer, slow, respectful, giving her endless room to step back. "You deserve peace," he continued softly. "A partner who honors you, a future that lifts you, not breaks you. And if you ever want that future to include me, I would be honored." Maddie's eyes filled, not with fear, not with heartbreak, with something warm, something whole. She placed her hand over his. "You didn't save me," she whispered. "You stood beside me while I saved myself." Nathaniel's eyes softened. "Then let me stand beside you for whatever comes next." She smiled, the first real unguarded smile she'd given anyone in years. And for the first time, the future didn't feel like a hallway she had to walk alone. It felt like a horizon opening, a life rebuilding, a heart healing, a story beginning again. Brad had taken her past, but he would never touch her future. So, that brings our story to a close. And if you are still here, still listening, still feeling every breath of Maddie's journey, then something in this story has touched your heart in a way you maybe didn't expect. Maybe it reminded you of your own storms, or of the strength you forgot you had. Life can bruise us, but like Marcus Aurelius once wrote, what stands in the way becomes the way. Maddie's pain didn't break her. It shaped her into someone stronger, wiser, clearer about what she deserved. And maybe that's the real message for all of us. You are allowed to walk away from what hurts you. You are allowed to rebuild. You are allowed to choose peace over chaos, love over fear, and truth over silence. Healing isn't a lightning strike. It's a slow sunrise. And you deserve to see that light. If this story moved you, inspired you, or simply reminded you that you're not alone, then do me a favor. Like this video, share it with someone who needs it, and hit that subscribe button so you and I can keep taking these journeys together. You being here means more than you know. Let's keep walking forward, one story, one breath, one healed piece at a time.